Hello.
Woo woo! How are you?
I figured we'd catch some people dancing there with the holding music. So
I was dancing.
I was feeling it. That was good.
awesome. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a ton to get through and some amazing guests today, so we want to get right to it. My name is Mitch Stein. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Pond. It's a marketplace for all the products and services you need at your nonprofits. We also have a special with these webinars where anyone who joins that is a member already or signs up afterwards, you're going to get $50 credit to your account just for attending and investing in yourself. So we're really excited about that. Without further ado, I would love to go around and have the group introduce themselves before we jump into this super important topic of professional development. So I'll go around and ask everyone to introduce yourself, but also share a few layers of your identity that are most important to you. And John, you are next to me, so I'll start with you.
All right. I feel like we could pass the baton if I could figure out which way is which. Thanks, Mitch, so much for having me. My name is John McCoy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of We Are for Good. So you may know us from the We Are for Good podcast. We're just showing up, sharing, helpful inspiration stuff online for the nonprofit and social good sector. My identity, I think the thing that resonates really with people the most is that we have two sets of twins, and they kind of are our entire life, my wife and I's life. We love to take them around the world and kind of show them the world and show them different perspective. And then the second thing is I was a graphic designer by trade. So I just have this perspective that's a little bit different than I think a lot of people in this space, that I love a white sheet of paper. I love dreaming up new ideas. I don't see boundaries. I don't see walls in the same way. And it really does inform the way that I show up and kind of view the world. I was just geeking out about this on my last call. So look for that. Look for the wild card answer from me. And there you go.
Awesome. Tanisha?
Hi, I'm Tanisha Nashler, and I'm the president and CEO of Newark Symphony Hall, which is a historic performing arts center in Newark, New Jersey. In terms of my identities, it probably absolutely is as a Black woman, but also as a mother, raising two girls. They're like my entire world. Everything that I do is really around the idea of making the world a better place for them. But I also know that they're constantly watching me. And so I'm also trying to be a great role model. I know this, by the way, because she's going to be 12 next month, but I think she was only about 7. And she was talking about the renovation that was about to happen at her school. And she said, yes, they need to have a really good community engagement plan. They hadn't been informed the community enough about all of the issues related to traffic. And that's when I knew she was listening to me. So
That's awesome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Becky, could you go next?
Oh man, it's hard to follow Tanisha, but my story is actually very similar. I think my identity is that I am also a mom to 2 daughters. One of the things that's very important to me is to be really open with my life and experiences, to kind of destigmatize a lot of things that we don't talk about in this world. So I have a real openness and passion for mental health. I had a mental health incident in my life that I've been very open about. I suffered from infertility. So my 2 precious girls that are about the same ages as Tanisha's are also such a big part of my life. And I also have 2 little activists. In fact, my 11-year-old in December got me hooked into a massive $10 million philanthropy campaign that was going on YouTube with a YouTuber called Mr. Beast. The things you learn, you guys, when you have like tweens, who raised $10 million for Ocean Conservancy, which connected to her heart for the environment. And so she gave to that campaign. We love just democratizing and evangelizing philanthropy because we think it's so powerful in our sector. I'm the second half of We Are for Good. John and I are married to different people, but he's been my little brother. I hired him when he was 22 and I was 25. I'm a writer by trade, and as John sees a blank sheet of paper and he wants to design, I want to write something beautiful for the world. I want to sit at the feet of a stranger, understand their stories. And my life is just about how do we democratize, lift up the voices of the marginalized? How do I use my privilege for good? And it's just been such a great outlet to do that for We Are for Good. And I'm just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So beautiful. Lauren, you mind wrapping it up here?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Lauren McCourt. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Youth Inc. I identify as a white woman. I'm also a mom. I have a son who is turning 2 in another couple of months. So he is a pandemic baby. That has been quite the experience, and a future hopeful activist. A lot of great role models for him here to follow, and strong women, it sounds like, which is excellent. And I also identify as a New Yorker. That is a huge part of my identity, born and bred. Have spent my career and my life working with nonprofits, coming up through nonprofits, organizations in the city. And it's a huge part of why I do what I do.
Can I just say two things before we get into the meat of things? I also suffered from infertility, Becky, so we should talk about that. My first child didn't come into 13 years of our marriage. And just a joke, Lauren, I've lived in New Jersey more than half my life, but I still call myself a New
That's great.
But yeah, anyway, on to the meat.
Totally. Well, no, I think this sets a great stage for the conversation, and all of you bring so much to bear. Speaking of setting the stage, Lauren, I'd love for you to kick us off. We're talking about the Great Resignation. You can't go anywhere without hearing about it the past few months. How does this show up in the nonprofit sector? Like, we've heard about turnover as a problem for a long time before the Great Resignation started. Where have you seen it? What does it mean to you, and why is it an issue?
Yeah. So at Youth Inc., we invest in about 80 youth-serving organizations in New York City. So get a huge privilege to be able to partner with them as they work to accomplish their very important missions. And we have consistently seen turnover as maybe one of the biggest issues, I guess, as I should really say. And, with the Great Resignation, we're certainly seeing it show up, that accelerating even more. For our partners, we're really seeing issues with holding on to program staff or retaining program staff, and it being a particularly challenging time for frontline workers who are dealing with so much burnout and emotional trauma, so a real lack of communication from program partners impacting the work. But to your point, Mitch, beyond the Great Resignation, turnover has been a huge issue for a long time now. And I think, to some extent, we all are always in a situation where, it's challenging for us to be able to provide competitive compensation, right? And I think a lot of people think of it in terms of pay. But I actually think there are a lot of things that are within our locus of control that we don't always focus on. And so it seems like sometimes we're operating in this self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think it's subconscious. So I don't think that it's fully present, but I think, we hire somebody probably after a few month vacancy. So we've gotten really behind on work. We hire this new person, and then in the back of our minds, we think they're going to be out of here within 2 years. So I need to get as much as possible from this individual in this position while they're here. And so we work ourselves into burnout, and then that person leaves, and the prophecy has been fulfilled, and it starts all over again with the next person. And so I think we frequently don't pay enough time or attention to creating the type of environment or culture that can retain people. And those things are within our control. So I think professional development as one component of that is a really important topic.
Awesome.
Okay, I got to jump in here. Oh, go ahead, Mitch. Go ahead, Mitch. You transition. I've always got lots of thoughts.
No, I was just going to quickly add, because I forgot to mention at the beginning, feel free, the audience, you can comment throughout. We will get to your question. We don't need to wait till the end if you've got a burning question that comes up. And I would also just love, even as we're getting started, if you're having issues with this, you're seeing people resign, and you just want to be seen and heard, throw it in the comments. And I think you'll see that a lot of people attending are having the same problem. But Becky, please go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to give all the snaps and props to Lauren for that beautiful analysis of what is actually happening there. And I want to thank you for even bringing in the word trauma, because there has been systemic trauma in nonprofit. And John is probably, rolling his eyes, because I am so geeked out about the Great Resignation. I am reading everything about it, because to me, it is a moment of reckoning. And I hope it's a moment of reset, because the trauma that we have experienced from this short tenure that we see in our industry is really crippling to the mission. And the fact that we've just accepted it is so backwards. to me. And the fact that I have known, in my 20 years in nonprofit, that the average tenure of someone staying in an organization is like 18 months. And I think our work is too important to be, and our relationships, these long-term relationships that we're trying to foster, are too important to have such a small tenure. And so I am loving the fact that we're taking a hard stop and we're looking at culture. We're looking at how we value our employees. We're looking to see, like, how diverse are we? Are we hiring people that represent the populations that we are serving within our missions? How are we bringing more inclusive and affirming voices to the table? And I think the thing that's so interesting about the Great Resignation to me is that it's really going to challenge people who have stayed within their box and their comfort zone of the way that we've been doing it. It's really going to, it's going to challenge them in a way that's, you're not going to be able to recruit the kind of talent that you want, that's magnetized to your mission, if you are not seeing all people, if you are not transparently putting out there what salaries are. That's one little hack and a pro tip you can do right now. When you post a salary or post a job description, post that salary. Put some really rich incentives in there. Do you give parental leave? Do you have unlimited PTO? Do you have mental health services that you can pour into that? All of that is going to attract the right person. And I would hope that those would connect with the values that your mission is upheld. And if you don't have those values that are written down, that are constantly lifted back up and say, this is why we exist, this is the kind of organization we want to be, and asking your staff, asking your donors, your volunteers to hold you accountable to those values, then they absolutely mean nothing. But the thing is, we're seeing people that are doing that in the nonprofit sector, they are scaling and accelerating. So there is such a moment right now where we're seeing the winners and the losers of the Great Resignation, and those that are leaning into innovation, to being a human being, which I know that sounds like just a very kindergarten, but seeing all people and treating them, equitably, caring about them beyond what they bring to you 8 hours a day. I just think it's absolutely fascinating. It's such a great challenge to all of us. I hope we're all rising. So anyway, I'll kick it off to the next person.
I just want to jump in on what you're saying, and that it's the communicating this is also really important, not just to the donors, but also to your volunteers, including your governing body. So our board, I had a whole meeting with our board talking about how I think it's really important that we improve our benefits, right? And that we improve our health insurance, and that we no longer pay minimum wage. And there was I'm going to be just real honest, there was fear about that. There was like, well, that's not how we approached things before. And the whole idea of working people, right, is really kind of what even board members, I think, are used to. And so it's like we have to shift our mindset to more wellness, because wellness also translates into what they want and other people want, which is productivity. But I really kind of don't like that, approaching it that way. But that's the case that we had to make. I'll tell you what, the other place that it's showing up, we're really fortunate that we are in an ability to hire. We're going to be going on a real hiring binge thanks to some fundraising. And how it showed up is that, people are dictating how they want their employment to be. There was one person who was an incredible candidate for our director of development role. But when I said that it's not going to be totally virtual, that there might be some aspects of having to show up, she sent a long explanation that unfortunately is not going to work for her. And I get it. I get that this is where she is. And because there are now folks that are willing to give 100% totally remote, never have to show up, in-person jobs, that's what what we're losing out to. But I don't think it's losing out. I think it's more, these are the folks that are dictating, their demands, and we have to fit into that if that is what we want.
I mean, this is something I love everything that has been said. And Tanisha, I love that you're like boots on the ground living this out. Like, it's so helpful, because the conversations that we're just seeing at a bigger global scale point back to that. It's just all so like intertwined, and I think it's cheesy to say, let's build back better, because that's so like trite, but it really is like, how do we go back to the values that we say that we're operating under as our mission, and make sure that that is the value that's being perpetuated in how we do everything internally, like really creating this culture that really perpetuates all that. And I think it changes it from these are things that are on the wall to like, be prepared to be called out and to get pushed back whenever it's not reflective in that. Because to me, this movement of the Great Resignation is about this awakening of, we all deserve to be in a place where you feel like you belong, on every level of that. And so I do think that, to me, PD flows straight into this, because I think it helps you feel confident to say that I don't have all the answers, that we're living in an unprecedented time and you need help. So you have to be in a culture that's safe enough to be able to say that, to go in and say, I do need help. This is a gap that I feel like I need to plug in, or I need to learn and grow. And having the safety, psychological safety, to be able to have those conversations is imperative as leaders to create that type of space. And I love that reckoning is happening.
I want to acknowledge something, though, that may not be in everybody's organization, but I want to speak for our organization, which is Black founded, Black led, predominantly Black and Brown serving, is that a lot of this is not because they don't want to. It's not that my board doesn't want to give better insurance, right? It's not that they don't want to, increase, but it's also a trauma response, right? And that trauma response is that we have been underfunded, undersupported for so many years. What are you saying, Tanisha, that we now need to do all these other things? Because there's a real fear that this trend of us being able to get money, which I will tell you, there's some people, and I'm new to the newish to the organization. I've been at this organization longer during a pandemic than not. So the pandemic has been going on for 2 years. I just celebrated 3 years. So for them, they feel that this might be a temporary success. And what if all of a sudden, all of this support that we've been getting, we lose, and then we're going to have to let everybody go anyway. And so my thing is, but that doesn't mean that we don't make the time that we have. First of all, I come from a place of abundance, so I don't believe in that. So that's one thing.
Preach.
But the other thing is, that doesn't mean that we're going to make it just a really traumatic environment anyway. I mean, the things that we did during the pandemic, from giving away food, right? And that included people who were no longer working for the organization, because the bulk of the people that work for our organization were minimum wage workers. Our full-time workers was less than a dozen. We issued more than 150 W-2s in a typical year. And that's for the per diem staff that are like, ushers and ticket takers, et cetera. But there was also addressing the fact that our staff lost people, right, during the pandemic. So addressing the wellness from that perspective. So I'm going to tell you that the way this pandemic changed me was to make sure that at every point, that was our focus. Our focus has to be the wellness of our people. It's just like how they tell you, as you've heard as a mother, right? And father, and people, that if you have somebody on the plane that you are responsible for, that you take the mask first, right? That's how I feel about it, that we do have a community that we're serving, but we have to be oxygenated first before we move on to support them.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think we were just trying to set the stage and just got into like 15 minutes of amazing insights. No, it's awesome. And I think that there's so much to dig into on I'll call them like less tangible benefit, like other benefits aside from pay. But I do think we'd be remiss to not hit on pay up front, because I hear it as the single biggest thing. People are like kind of resigned to the fact like, oh, well, we're at a nonprofit, so we can't pay as well. Do any of you have experience or see things where people have effectively gotten their boards on board to increase pay, or have effectively been able to raise more funds to increase pay, or what is the dynamic there when you hear that as an excuse, or you can say, actually, no, here's what you can do?
We have. So we did, and we put it in our proposal as well. We put in the proposal, most recent proposal, that the funds that we were requesting from this foundation was towards pay equity, but it was also towards increasing staff so that it decreased the workload on our people. And those are the kinds of things that I think it was a little scary for folks to think that that's what we were doing. But I said to the board, we now have to be in a space where we're very honest about what our needs are. Because my mama said, a closed mouth don't get fed. So we need to actually talk about what our needs are. And I'm pleased to say that we were very recently successful. In fact, the most recent funder, this just happened last week, asked us to send a list of salaries. I'd never been given this before. And what would the salary be is before their funding and after. And, I was so excited to be able to increase our lowest people and to show this is the commitment that we're making if you give us this few $100,000. So it is possible for your audience to know that that is something that, what's the worst people can say? No, they don't want to support this and they don't want to support. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. We were giving people $13 an hour at the lower end. And so this was something that we did. And I'm pleased to say 2 days ago, we were successful in getting that. That's a different grant, Becky, than the one that we were working on the other day.
You got grants coming out your ears, and I am
Becky,
here
for it. Good luck for it. Yes.
That's great. Congratulations. That's huge.
Absolutely.
We have also been pretty successful in increasing pay over time. YouThink has taken a really, in part really driven by our executive director, who comes from the financial services sector before she was executive director at YouThink. And for many corporate organizations, compensation and pay is super important. And there's a lot of time and intention, and they would never consider, not providing raises, to their employees over time. That would be detrimental and critical to their own business models. So I think, making it a value and having that conversation and saying, we wouldn't do this anywhere else. And in our sector, we're trying to accomplish massive social impact. Why would we possibly take that same, why would we continue with this approach? And I think it's great to hear that you've had success talking to your board about it, because I think that's one of the first steps. I know when we're speaking to our nonprofit partners, a lot of them, to your point, want to be able to increase comp. They want to be able to, but a couple of things get in the way. I think, do your research and try to understand comps. 990 information is available. Executive directors, particularly founders, get yourselves paid. This is a terrible practice we have in the sector of founders being chronically underpaid, and it ricochets through the rest of the organization. If you're not paid, your staff aren't being paid. If you're not paid, it's really hard to bring new folks into the organization at the level that you need. So I think, pay is a value for everybody. It is really critical. And having that conversation with your board, transparently with your board, making it a priority on board agendas or with the proper committees, not letting that conversation go, continue to talk about it, continue to bring new information, get information from your staff about, compensation and how that's impacting them. I think that's something that people are very afraid of, because we feel like we're going to box ourselves into a corner of, but I can't do anything about this. And so did I just open a Pandora's box where everybody says, I'm not able to get paid enough, and then what am I able to do with it? But that's part of the information you need in order to understand what a competitive compensation policy is, and to encourage folks to focus on compensation along with you. So it's got to be a constant focus and come up as a real value in every conversation that you have.
Can I just say one other thing that was really helpful? There was another not-for-profit that was searching for what I would say more junior staff, but in our space, in the arts. And they listed their salary, and they also listed the benefits. And so I happened to know that ED, and I called her and I said, well, I noticed that, the benefits also talks about contributions to retirement, and we don't currently offer that. And I said, well, how much are you doing? And she said, oh, it's not much. I think she said the amount was 2%. And I said, well, that's more than zero. So we currently do zero. So I was able to not only raise our lower staff members' salary, because I had a comp, and I again showed my personnel committee, this is where these jobs should be. And I haven't gotten the 2% yet, but I'm working on, I don't have it. Like none of us have it, right? But I'm currently working on that. And to my former treasurer and current treasurer's credit, they are now looking at it. But again, I want to acknowledge, especially since some of them might be watching, that it's not that they don't want to, right? It's more of I'm going to be honest with you, a fear. I hope they don't mind me using that word, because that's really what it is. There's a fear that the bottom is going to drop out and they won't be able to do it anymore. So thank you for the space to say that.
Don't you just want to work for Tanisha and Lauren? Like, I hear you all speak and I'm just like, I wish we had more of you out there. And I want to hit like the elephant in the room with pay, like right between the eyes, if I may. One thing that I feel like has crippled our entire sector is this notion of overhead, and this notion of I want my gift to go directly to the cause. Overhead is people power missions. And if you want these crises solved, if you want these issues addressed, you are going to have to pay equitably. I sit there and think of just the scarcity mindset, and and I love your point, Tanisha, the fear-based approach to that. And I see Taylor's comment here about how do we start to begin to combat this starvation. Oh, look how good Eve is. She just pops it up there. The question, how do we combat this starvation cycle? And to me, it's about education and it's about being bold. And I will share a personal story from myself in my own career. And I worked at a very large health system in Oklahoma. And when I negotiated my pay to come in, I put in an added benefit. I had a 4-month-old child, and this will tell you just a little bit how crazy Becky is in terms of planning. But I negotiated
ahead of your time.
Well, we'll see. But I said, when my daughter goes to kindergarten, I want to leave at 3:00, and I want that written in to my agreement. So this was like 2010. And so they honored that. But when they came back and said, we'll give you that 5 years later, we're going to redline your salary, which means that I'm never going to get paid any more than I did in that moment. And so in between the 5 years that I got redlined and the 5 years that I continued to stay there, I'm just not money motivated as a human being. So I didn't tie that to my value, which was a really big mistake. And so we had a massive campaign going on. So I was bringing in maybe, for our little organization, if we were having a $12 million year, I might bring in half of that. And I was getting the exact same pay. So this is what I did. I went to my CFO of our massive 10,000 person healthcare system, and I said, give me the position that makes the most money for the bottom line for our system. And I want you to strip out all of the administrative cost, just keep his salary and tell me how much he's bringing in. The fundraisers are bringing in more than a cardiothoracic surgeon to the bottom line. And until you can actually show a bean counter that actually our value is higher than the volume that this physician is bringing into the health system, they're simply not thinking about that. And so it gives you some power to go to the board and say, Mr. CEO, who sits on my board of random ABC company, you're paying your salesperson at this level because you want them to keep selling. We're not only doing the same thing, but we're moving hearts and minds and solving the world's largest problems. We've got to fight for equity, for our own value in that. So that was a short-sighted thing that I had to learn the hard way. Please do as I say, not as I do. And I'll step back and quit talking now.
If I could quickly, I'd love to get people's feedback on this point of, because we've talked a lot about from the perspective of, I'm a leader. Like, it sounds like most of this has been like, I'm the ED, I'm making these decisions. What if you're a staff person? Like how, and people use the term safe space a lot. We had a guest on last week. Her name's Lisa Gavan. She's incredible and everyone should go follow her, but she loves to talk about, forget safe space. We can do better. We need a brave space. And I think getting that level of comfort from people to feel brave enough to ask for the raise or ask for more benefits, like Becky just said, when you're in the staff position, how can people tackle those power dynamics? If you're in that more junior role, how can you effectively advocate for yourself? And if you're more senior, how can you make that brave space around this discussion, which is so hard?
I mean, I do think I love the question, because I think that is showing me that is a growth mindset type individual. And I think that's where you got to start, like within, are you hungry for that type of learning and growth? Because it makes you prime for that investment, makes you prime to have these conversations, because there's so much you can learn today that's just like accessible, and you're not waiting on somebody to greenlight you. And there's a lot of ways to plug in that way. But I think, like, almost to Becky's example, I think was really strong here, to just say, you've got to understand the motivations and the way the person's thinking, because I don't think that if you really painted the case, I think there's a lot of times people don't understand that they're not going to block you from saying, hey, I'm going to open up this new revenue line for our organization, but you may need to walk them through some of those steps to get there. And so I think when you're trying to make a case for your own professional development, you've got to be able to actually build a little bit of that case. If you're not in an evolved organization that's already, I mean, what kind of opportunities are going to exist? Where are you getting blocked now that this could unlock? I posted this morning on LinkedIn because I feel really passionate that professional development is really the highest ROI thing in your budget. And it's like the easiest thing to slash, but that one breakthrough, that one ability to connect with somebody that gives you a different perspective on something, or this one path to like save you time, could be literally the highest ROI thing that you attend or that you invest in. But you may need to help some of the people that are less evolved to understand what that kind of breakthrough would look like for you personally. And so building a little bit of a business case, I think is a good thing anyway. It helps you weigh out, where do I really want to invest? Where do you have limited time anyway? So really think about, what do you want to become? Like, is it clear what you're trying to advance, what you're trying to grow, and what you want to be in your own professional life? And then figure out what the options are, and then go sell the case. Because once you really paint the picture of what's possible, it's a pretty easy yes. But I don't think you can just, say, hey, I want to go to Vegas and go to this conference and get wined and dined. I don't think that's the approach, but I do think figuring out what is that selling point could help you. Now, let me preface, the leaders should be driving this, in a great organization. The leaders should be coming and pushing and having these conversations. But I'm really speaking to the person that feels stuck, because I've felt stuck in my own personal career. But don't let that hold you back. I mean, this is your own personal development too. And so there's some strategies for you to get started, at least.
Yeah. And one thing, there was a great question in the chat from Stacy. And if I'm interpreting it correctly, I think what she's pointing to is, making a case within a current system. What if there's an issue with the system, right? Like, how do you point out system issues as a junior person? And so I don't know if folks have thoughts on that. Maybe it's this is a question more for leadership to make sure they're not reinforcing those structural inequities.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Just to go to what John said and what you said, Mitch, I think I must have cultivated an environment where people feel that they can just say things clearly, because, well, I'll give you a great example, because we are going to be undertaking a huge renovation. It's long overdue. But in the interim, we have some issues with folks that in other places call homeless. And in Newark, we call them residents without addresses, because they are residents of our community, but they don't have permanent housing. And so there was a whole slew of meetings about it. And there was a request from our architects to come up with some sort of mitigation things. And one staff person said, I'm sorry, this really just seems like aggressive architecture. And I stopped, because I think that I'm the most progressive, open-minded person. And I said, you know what? Let's think about this. So they feel they can say anything. And I had people ask me for more money because they knew that I was advocating for more money. So I do think it's me as the leader. I have to be okay with that, right? I have a number of different things that are pulling on me, but I had to, when this person made a good case of why they thought they should, even though I'm getting a raise for her, an even bigger raise, I had to listen to that, right? And so it is about the leadership being receptive. I wanted to talk about return on investment real quick, because about the time, and how even though it wasn't for ROI, I invested in professional development, and John and Becky know this story. So when I started at Newark Symphony Hall, there were some people who I saw the staff, there were skills gaps, I will call them. And so I asked a consultant to come in and do a study based on those skills gaps. And they came back, and based on that, we created a professional development plan for everybody. And again, you can do it because it's less than a dozen people. Well, we were tracking for another deficit. Unfortunately, we were plagued with many deficits before I got here. And 7 months after I arrived, even though we were still tracking for another six-figure deficit, we ended with about $80,000 in surplus. And same people. So the only thing that was different, right, was that there was a recognition around a need to support them, right? Because many of them said that they hadn't had any kind of support in their role. And that I came from a place where I always had professional development. So to be doing both individual plans and group retreats and all that, and they're telling me that they never experienced that, to me, that just also showed that that was something that I'm going to give it to the fact that there was not a space for that and a thinking of investing in that, because I really was given two choices, frankly, either get rid of everybody, right, and bring in people that already had the skills, or invest in the people that were there. And in my view, the fact that they couldn't do those things, but they can now, by the way, was really an indictment of many systems in a place like Newark, New Jersey. So I just want to talk about that there is a business case for the people who are interested in for investing in professional development for the organization. And I'll tell you the other thing that came to me. Someone says, well, aren't you concerned that if you're, bolstering their skills and you're getting all this, that they might leave? And I said, well, they're not, they're not enslaved. Of course they can leave, but they haven't, right? So the fact is, because we're investing in them, they feel more of an allegiance and a commitment, because they know, and I get this all the time in staff meetings too, even though sometimes they're asking me for stuff. Thank you. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for thinking this way. Thank you for thinking I might not be here more than a couple years. And instead of trying to take advantage of me, thinking about how it could be mutually beneficial for our organizations. And I challenge other executive directors to think from that perspective too.
I love that.
I was just going to add really quickly, Tanisha, that the other thing about the nonprofit space that I've seen so much is it's kind of a small world. And the more you invest in people, yeah, of course, people are going to leave. No one's ever going to be there forever. But when you're hiring in the future and you need a recommendation, if they had a great experience with you, they're going to send someone your way. So it is, we need to echo that 1,000 times, that you still need to invest in people, even if they're going to leave, because they're going to be a recruiter. They could be a donor. They could be an amplifier for your cause after the fact. Like, don't burn bridges. Keep great relationships with people.
Yeah. I was just that makes me think too much of just the larger mission that we're all working to accomplish, right? Very few of us have such narrow focuses. Usually we're trying to impact systems. And so if we're going to impact those systems and we're actually going to work to make progress on our missions, it's not just about our singular organizations, it's about all of us that are working to do that. And so, I think it's important to also think of it as, educating our community, so that even if, they stay with your organization, fantastic. If they leave, they're bringing that to the next organization, and that's going to have ripple effects in our collective ability to get the work done. So I think it's a real missed opportunity, in thinking of it in a too narrowly. In the chat, Stacy says ripples of impact. So
I saw that. I'm loving it.
You guys are like-minded. You guys are like-minded.
Yeah.
And I feel like Stacy could be doing some pond branding for us, so I'll have to reach out to you afterwards.
Trademark it quickly,
awesome.
Stacy. So I do want to talk about professional development in this moment as it intersects with nonprofit, because I am so geeked out about the potential that exists right now. So John and I host this 3 times a week podcast, and we are bringing people in and talking all the time about what is the shift right now in nonprofit. And I don't think there has ever been a time in our history where we have seen so much shift in the way we work and the way we connect and the way we build global community. And so my challenge to everybody out there is, what if, rather than having professional development be the first thing you cut, what if it's the first thing you add into your budget this year? Because we believe that education is for everyone, and we've got to level up right now because the world is so different. I mean, we were seeing a study the other day that said at the end of 2019, 1 in 25 people were working from home. And right now at the end of 2021, it's 1 in 7. And I just think about the dynamic that creates. And the Great Resignation has made people pause and think about their purpose in life. And there was another study that came out I saw last week that said that people no longer think that working hard is going to give them a better life. And so as people are chasing purpose, they want to be poured into. And the value that that gets in terms of feeling worth and grow, it increases retention, and you enjoy going to work more. You feel valued and invested in. It gives you loyalty to the place that you are in. And all of the byproducts of that are only going to benefit an organization as someone stays. And all of that historical information is staying with that information, that knowledge stays. And I think if you can create such an environment and a culture that is so invested in people and growing, especially right now, if you don't have anything in your budget for digital, you need to figure out how to move around some money to figure out how you can be investing in digital and growing global community. Because no longer are we fundraising in our little neighborhoods, in our communities. The world is global. There is someone on the other side of the ocean who cares about your mission. They care about the expertise and value that you are bringing. They just need to hear your story. They need to see your values expressed so that alignment can come in. And they want to be, I mean, I could think of so many examples that we've seen on our podcast of people finding other people because of the way that they story tell, whether it's socially or through email. This is a connected world. And I will tell you that Gen Z, they are hardwired to care, to align their values with their philanthropy. Even if they have nothing to give, they're giving their time. And if you can cultivate them and play the long game and bring them in and give them a hell of an early experience and manage that relationship and that engagement over time, make them feel seen, it will pay dividends that are so much bigger than putting all of your eggs into the basket of the largest donor of your organization. And for us, that we talk about all the time on We Are for Good, is we don't want to create a culture that brings in donors. We want to create a vibrant culture that brings in believers. Because when somebody believes so deeply in your mission, they're going to give, they're going to volunteer, they're going to evangelize and tell their network why they love you. And there are so many benefits. I'm back to the ripple. The ripples that come back to that are going to be so long-standing. And it really starts with making people on the front lines feel invested in, trained up, and ready to meet this moment. Stepping off my soapbox.
I'm like so inspired. I'm like, okay.
You're doing it, my friend. We follow you. I mean, I really would encourage anyone to just go check out the Newark Symphony Hall, because what Tanisha Nashler has done to bring community into her mission is just next level entrepreneurial thinking. And I will just also give you a shout out, because the literal first thing that Tanisha did when she assumed the ED role was to create that development plan for her people. She literally didn't go to the budget. She didn't go to the board. She started on the front lines with her people. And that was when we fell in love with you, my friend. So bravo.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just a representative for our little team. When you go to our website and just look at our staff, just know that that's everybody, including the 2 part-timers that we have to make it look like. so I'm just being transparent. But thank you. This is hard work, though. I want to encourage the people who are watching who might not be in decision-making capacity, that you can still lead from where you are, and that you can lead from the middle, and take all of this great stuff that that Becky and John and Lauren and maybe I'm saying, and take it back to the people who do have the power to make the decisions, because it's so important to invest in professional development. And if they're not going to do it for humanity reasons, which I'm going to be very honest, I was doing it for humanity reasons, that was just a great benefit. That
Empaths unite. I'm
right,
with you.
right. They should really be doing it for their organization. They're going to see the return on the investment.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was just reflecting on what you said. And I think it's so important to think about why that doesn't happen, because I do think that, to your earlier point, many people would love for professional development to be happening, or for staff to feel connected to the mission. It's not necessarily for want, probably, right? I think it's interesting to think about what really gets in the way. I think you're an incredible example of role modeling and really bringing values and putting them into practice and behaviors which I think is something that's often overlooked is, I say that this is a value, but unfortunately that's where it stops. I don't know how to then turn it into a behavioral practice. And as we were talking, I was just thinking to myself about, well, what are the things that I have seen, get in the way? And I think one of those things that really strikes me is around goals. It's so interesting to me how when, we have conversations with our partners, when Youth Inc. has conversations internally, the tying professional development to organizational goals, how tricky that can sometimes be because of how little time there is spent on determining what those goals are to begin with. And what are annual goals? What about your strategic plan goals? Is it sitting up on a shelf somewhere, or do you, monitor and manage to it every year? How do you bring it back forward? Tanisha, you sound very, very goal oriented, and like you have a very clear concept and vision for the future of this organization. And again, we can see that coming into place with the decisions and behaviors that you put into place to make it happen. And so I think, just trying to understand what are all of those sort of behavioral changes that go alongside being able to really value professional development and make it happen and not just want it are really important.
Mission,
Lauren, I think
vision, values, and living those things.
Yeah.
Totally. I think we've been pounding the drumbeat here for about 45 minutes on how this is so important and a lot of great examples. I'd love to make sure in the last 13 minutes we have here, first of all, if anyone has questions, definitely throw them in. One of the questions that came up, which ties into what I was going to ask, was about tools and technology to be making sure that professional development's a priority. I think beyond that, would love to just get some tangible examples of like, okay, I'm on board. Professional development it is. What does that mean? Like, what do I do next? Demystify that a little bit. What works? What can you do? Let's make it tangible for folks.
So most recent hire, we just put in a budget. He didn't ask for it. I just said, this is your salary. These are your, these are the other benefits. And that benefit includes a budget for professional development that you select. If I select something, it does not count against his budget. So that budget that was given to him, it's his self-directed. He can select, but then there could be additional things. And there are additional things that we are doing that go above and beyond what he's given as an allowance. That's how I
love that advice. Every one of your answers, I'm like, you were so evolved and wonderful, Tanisha. I just love everything you say.
I come from what I wanted as a person, as an employee, and now I'm in charge.
Yeah.
So I guess mine, Mitch, like something that's real practical came up in an interview that we did with the founders of She's the First, based in New York. They're global. They're incredible leaders. They just wrote the book Impact last year. And I think that's a really cool personal guidebook to like figuring out what you really care about. Where do you want to invest your time, value, treasure, all of that. But they really encourage us to like set up your own impact board. It's like, because we were emoting that, wow, the people that are on your board are some of the biggest change makers in the industry. And she kind of pushed back on us to say, they are, that's great. Like we love those relationships, but in today's world, like we all have the ability to queue up our own impact board in our life, that the people that we listen to, the people we follow, maybe it's the things that we listen to or the sessions we attend, and making sure that you're getting cognitive diversity there and diversity of thought and diversity of viewpoint and all those factors. But you can really create this sounding board that is your guidepost personally. Because I think a lot of this professional development to me always comes back to how are you personally investing in your own personal growth, whether your employer is going to get on board or not. There is so much that can be done in just finding and selecting those people that you do want to just lean into and listen to. And sometimes you even can meet them. It's so easy now to just DM and say, man, you really inspired me with what you said on this post or in this interview that I heard you on. And so often the people that seem untouchable now are really accessible. And I think that those relationships I don't undersell, because a thread that hasn't come up, but I know everybody on this panel would agree, like community is this missing ingredient of professional development, like learning in community and learning together as a team in community, but also the global community, people that you find, the Tanishas, the Laurens, that I feel kindred spirits to all of y'all, that you need to do this together. It's not work that you do just on a silo in your own. It's you do it together in community. And that's what sharpens us all. So all of it kind of pushes together, but none of that costs anything, the stuff that I'm throwing out there. And I think a lot of that is possible. as a good starting place. So if you're feeling discouraged and want to just take a move even today, do that.
Right. I think don't underestimate the power of a simple individual development plan, right? Like there are just simply having a set, picking up a set template and using it consistently across the organization, making sure that everybody is having a conversation about how they want to develop professionally in and of itself can be very powerful. And you may not have the resources to be able to, send somebody for a higher degree, immediately. But just that conversation in and of itself can be really great. And for it to be a conversation. So, making sure that folks are not dictating to certain staff where they need to grow professionally. This isn't a performance conversation. This is a professional development conversation. This is a coaching conversation, totally different than performance, right? And so understanding that those are two different conversations and that this is a new practice, maybe not a new practice, maybe one that you already have, maybe it's an opportunity to take a look at how it's going. Check in with your staff and see, how do those conversations go with your managers and with me? Do you feel like we're really getting to the root of where you want to grow and develop? And how do I understand that? And for managers and leaders to recognize that you need to be open-minded. You need to really treat this as an exploration and an opportunity for that individual staff person to share and explore the options for their future. Can be a sort of no cost, obviously people might identify resources that they want that will have a cost to them, but those conversations in and of themselves have power.
I love that, Lauren. And I love how you talk about options for your future. I don't know that I've ever even thought about it in that way. And I think just this conversation is giving me such a heart for someone who might be listening who is not a leader. And they're thinking, how do I go advocate on behalf of myself? And we have such a heart for the little nonprofit too, who is bootstrapped in their resources and they're trying to do so much with so little. And I would say, spend some time researching what you want and go fight for it. And I say fight for it in the gentlest, most co-building kind of way. But I want to tell you to get a plan together of what you want. Propose that, show that you've done your research and talk about why you think this has value. There is so much free professional development out there for us. And the reason that we set up a podcast is one, we know that podcast listeners are learners. They're curious, they're naturally curious, and they take on learning on their own. And so we really liked that space because we wanted it to be a democratic space. But I will tell you, We Are for Good is not the only nonprofit podcast out there. There are so many excellent podcasts out there that are addressing a lot of these issues that you can just tap on while you're going to work. There are free conferences and free summits, and some that cost, but also have scholarships connected to them. And so I would say do a lot of research. It wasn't until we set up this company that I actually looked around comprehensively and said, there's a lot out here that is really high quality. We built a Netflix for nonprofits on our platform because we just wanted to disrupt even the way that we connect. And we wanted to have actionable points at the end, but mindsets at the beginning, because we talk so much about everything in between and the theory, but we have to know that our minds are in that abundance, welcoming space. And if you have abundance mindset, that means you're open to learning and growing. And I don't care how long you've been in the industry, we all have to be open to learning. And I love the point about cognitive diversity because, I'm a white woman in Oklahoma. My lived experience is going to be pretty narrow in what I've been able to see and do, which kind of begs that we need to get out there and open up our tables, pull hands up to the table, lift up voices, use our privilege. But I would just want to encourage everybody, go fight for your professional development and do it in a way that is a co-building thing. Can you help me achieve all these things? Because I believe that I can do X, Y, and Z that tie into our strategic plan. I believe that global community can do this. And I think that creates just really great space for this conversation. And if you can be brave enough to do that, you're not only advocating on behalf of yourself, you're fighting for every single employee in there who hasn't found the moxie or the courage to kind of step up and advocate too. So start educating yourself. And I just here's my mom hug. I like mama bear you, because you can do this and you are worthy of being invested in. So please go fight for that this year.
Totally.
That's
thank
like
you,
a mic
Becky, for
drop
that.
right there. So
There's some questions that have come up in the chat too that I wanted to bring up. So Tim asked about internal growth opportunities. You were just speaking to maybe smaller organizations or more junior people, but what if you're in a larger organization? How can you make sure you're cross-pollinating and getting people communicating across departments? How have you seen that work out well?
Well, I just said that we're all like, 6 + 2 people, 8, but we recently did start doing more of that. And it's so funny. Because we're doing this big hiring thing, the call that I was on right before this, I actually encouraged a staff person. I said, you might want to look at other things that you might want to get into, because I want to be able to reward you for the time period that you were here. We're going to be adding all these people that are presumably, senior, right? They're not presumably, they're up, but I still want to make sure that, and this particular person was a young lady, that she has an opportunity. And I said, maybe, talk to the new person that's being hired to see if there's something that you can do to assist him in his department. So I think, again, that's something that can be encouraged, but also something that you should ask for if you're not a leader. I know I did that all the time. I was constantly asking for being able, and, I was donating my time though. I was saying, hey, I'll do this in addition to the other things. I'm in a space now where I'm not trying to encourage people to do that, but I do say go and ask for an opportunity to explore other departments than the one that you're in.
I agree. I think options like cross-training and stretch assignments. So professional development can take lots of different forms, right? Some of them are those opportunities to see what else is happening within the rest of the organization and where do they align with your personal interests, and can you take on some stretch assignments to be able to grow. And I think that, particularly for larger organizations where I think, departments, maybe work in not to assume that they work less collaboratively or in a more siloed way, but where you're individually may not be able to see that work happen every day. Talking with your colleagues is a great way to better understand what are the opportunities to grow, what else is happening in another area of the organization that I might have interest in, and then being able to advocate for the chance to work with that person, to collaborate with that person, to support on a particular project. Again, can be a great way to use your own organization to support your own professional development efforts. And same thing goes for managers, right? Thinking about what are the stretch assignments you might be able to offer this individual, or, what other networking can you set up coffees between the person that you manage and somebody else at the organization that you think, might benefit their professional development, can be a great way to go as well.
And
I
that
hope
brings
the
up a
audience
great.
has been taking notes, because Lauren, I've been taking so many notes from the things that you would say.
Lauren is wise.
Wise.
Not a performance
I was
issue,
just-
a personal development issue. But anyway, go ahead.
Wait.
I was just going to add that, that's never been more clear than when we're working remotely. It doesn't happen by accident that you bump into people. You have to be intentional to make sure that those connections are happening. And to your point, that's professional development, making sure your own staff is learning from each other in their own expertise areas.
Right.
Love that. Well, we only have 1 minute left, and I don't want to hold anyone over. I know we're all super busy. As Tanisha mentioned, notes we'll put video will be available, so you can also share this with your boss if you want a really subtle way to get them focused on the topic. So it'll be very subtle.
Slide
on
this
YouTube
over.
and LinkedIn. Immediately afterward, we'll also have a summary blog post we'll put out next week with all the key takeaways and resources to point you to. Also, this series, it's every week. It'll be on Thursdays, literally every week, covering all kinds of top topics for nonprofits with experts around the field and around the country. So just keep tuning in. This is also great professional development. And if you're on Pond, you'll be getting benefits for it. The last thing I wanted to mention is we do also have a special announcement I had promised. We have a partnership with We Are for Good that you are the first people hearing about it. It's really exciting. This is the first Pond perk we're rolling out for people using the platform. So you can take $100 in Pond credits and you get 3 months unlimited access to We Are for Good Pro. And also, if you sign up for the year with We Are for Good Pro, you'll get $100 in credits back in your account. So we'll share more detail on this with everybody. But in the vein of professional development, making it more accessible, we wanted to do our part and are really excited to share.
We are so excited, Mitch. Thank you so much for unlocking this opportunity. What a huge honor to partner with you guys.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for everyone who joined. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you for the great questions. We will let you all get back to work. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Have a good